Call to order the Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday, March 28th, 1:30. We have a small amount of business, most of which is to take care of some technical amendments, but we'll wait until Brian gets here since he's the brains in the operation on that, excluding, and of course John is the other part of the brain in the operation.
Clearly no one here.
Clearly not this group.
Vacuum.
You're excluding yourself, Joe. You've got a third of the brains in the operation. But one of the items that is on our agenda for today is to have a discussion about Article 67, which you all should have very recently gotten. I got it last night from the proponents, and the subject for our discussion is based on information and a discussion that I had at the request of Melissa Murphy, Jen Cohen, who's here on this article, was to make a consideration on moving our recommendation from take no action to presumably a positive motion. What I explained is that we have evolved a practice of not making changes to motions this close to town meeting, but that if it was the sense of the committee that we felt that we would like to speak positively about it, somebody on the FinCom would get up and do that at town meeting. As I recall, part of the reason that we passed on the and went to a take no action, aside from the fact that we felt that it was probably would be a public policy discussion, and that the community could weigh in on that. It was at the time, I think, advice from John about the potential cost and the effort that was going to be required to make those changes. Note, as you all know, that the Board of Selectmen have done some of the work, and but it's the request for the changes through a home rule petition obviously go beyond what the Board of Selectmen have done. So, John, I think it would probably help us all if you would just spend a few minutes and tell us a little bit about the what has to be done and the like, and then we can have our deliberation. Why don't you just come and sit here? And I'm assuming we're being recorded, but
so good afternoon. This gets a little bit complicated, but let me see if I can explain it. If this were proposed as simply a regular amendment to the town charter, it would require a 2/3 vote of town meeting. And I think that the way this is written, then if it were to pass as a charter amendment, we could simply have the town code publisher make all of the changes. The issue is, where do the words Board of Selectmen appear in the charter? And obviously in all those instances, the name would be changed to the Select Board. But this is actually proposed as a home rule petition, which is not that uncommon in Nantucket and elsewhere to do charter amendments by home rule petition. But it will have to go to the legislature. And in our experience, the legislature could very well require that the bill that would be considered actually identify every section of the charter where the words Board of Selectmen appear, changing it to Select Board. I did a quick count on the website, and I think there's about 64 references. So I've sort of struggled with this, and I think my recommendation would be that if Article 67 passes, that we submit it to the general court as written, and maybe it won't be an issue for the court, for the general court. Maybe they'll make the changes, but they can always get back to us and say, you need to prepare this bill in the following form, and then we could certainly do that. So That's my recommendation, and I have made that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for their meeting tonight, because as you may know, the Selectmen are going to consider tonight the adoption of a administrative policy that they will be referred to as Select Board in the future. So when I really drilled down on this, there were two other issues I raised with the Selectmen, and I'm sharing with the petitioners and with the Finance Committee this afternoon. The first is that in addition to the town charter, you have a county charter. And of course, there are references in the county charter to Board of Selectmen. Now, fortunately, under the county charter, there's a much simpler way to amend that charter. The county commissioners can propose an amendment, and as long as they do that at least 150 days before the annual town election, that question would go on the ballot. So certainly if this passes at town meeting, the county commissioners could certainly propose an amendment to the county charter as well, and we'll have plenty of time to do that, and that could be effective at the May 2019 annual town election. The other issue is the town code itself, meaning the bylaws of the town, have numerous references to the Board of Selectmen, both in the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws. And so at some point, if all of this is going to go forward, then we would need to come up with a warrant article to amend the code, not the charter, but the bylaws and the general bylaws. And again, I think because that doesn't go to the general court, we can certainly have language that says change it wherever it appears, and then we would send that to the code publisher, and they would actually make those changes. So I think that's where we stand at this point. If the Finance Committee has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
So it sounds like net we go ahead with this language, and the wheels of progress will turn from. I mean,
yes,
the Board of Selectmen has already decided they want to. They're willing to change their own name to Select Board. So.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation is if this is passed, we submit it to the general court as written, and if we have to make any further changes to it at the request of the general court, we can certainly do that.
And how long would that overall process take? Through May 2019, as you just said?
Well, you know, this is not going to be at all a controversial home rule petition, so hopefully it will be acted on relatively quickly. I can't tell you when the legislature will act on it, but I'm trying to remember when probably not this session, maybe this session, I don't know. We'll just it depends upon how vigorously your representatives push it and what the docket looks like in terms of, you know, they get flooded with a lot of home rule petitions, as you can imagine, so it can take some time. I would say at a minimum a couple of months, and the outside deadline is, I don't know. How's that for an answer?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think you had mentioned to us, what, the over 40 other towns in the state that have made the change, they've done it through the home rule petition?
It's all over the map. I've seen a number of towns do it as a policy by the Board of Selectmen, which is what the Selectmen are doing tonight. I've seen it done as a charter amendment, and I've seen it done as a bylaw amendment. So because a lot of towns don't even have a charter. Now, in terms of charter amendments, you know, as I said, there are the two ways to do it. You can do it by this home rule petition process, or you simply amend the charter by a 2/3 vote at town meeting. It's approved by the Attorney General, and then it goes on the ballot at the next regular town election, or the state election. You can do it that way as well. But this is a home rule petition, so it will go to the legislature.
Okay. Would you like to
Sure.
address this august body, or?
Thank you for having me here today. So,
Just for the record, it's Jen
Jennifer
Cohen.
Cohen, yes, and my fellow co-sponsor is not available today. So it's just me with my backup here. This is a home rule petition, and we have been been working with both our senator and our representative at the state level, who are very strongly in support of this home rule petition. And from my understanding is that if you look at sort of the wave of some of these towns, initially, I mean, some of these towns, especially early on in the western part of the state, this was done, 7, 8 years ago, quite a while ago. It seemed like as we get closer to where we are today, you see more and more towns choosing to take the route that we are proposing here, because, as we all know, language matters, and a sort of more thorough change gives a little more credence to the idea that our government is open, accessible, and understandable to everybody. And that's the goal of this. I mean, truly, that's the pure goal of it. It's to say, look, we're Nantucket, we've been on the edge of making decisions like this before. We're a progressive town, and we do want our town to be accessible to all. So that's why we decided to go the route that we did go. We have the support. Our senator has been talking to the Mass Municipal Association. Unfortunately, they had, even as late as yesterday, they said, we'll have you all set by the time you have to go to your meeting. They didn't have it yet, but with some hard and fast numbers on what was done. I'm glad that I heard how many instances the Board of Selectmen were in the charter, because I didn't look that up yesterday. I did look through the bylaws and just sort of do a search function there. It's...
And how many were in the bylaws about, Jen? Do you
In
know?
the bylaws I have, and this includes the zoning, 223 references to the full phrase Board of Selectmen, 154 to the word selectmen, and 4 to select man.
Okay, thank you.
And so, and frankly, it wasn't until I started searching that I thought if to make the change the way we're talking about making it, we'll get rid of those 154 to select men and the 4 to select man, when clearly we have 2 women who sit on the board now. And the current board is very much in favor of it, as you can see, with sort of starting the ball rolling last week and continuing through to this week. As I stood up and said last week to them, I see their action is very much in support of this article, and I think that they agree that it is very supportive. So our representative and senator, they've agreed that they will draft the bill for us, and we'll have letters of support from them. They are in the process of preparing them now for town meeting, but they have offered to draft the bill for us because they understand that at this point in 2018, it's a small change, it's a small effort with contrasting to a deep meaning. So I don't know if you have any questions for me. I mean, that's what I'm here for, is to answer some questions. And yes.
Where's Russell, Mass?
Oh, Russell, out in Western Mass. I was really surprised to see, and I guess that's, my Eastern Massachusetts ignorance. I was really surprised to see how these Western states were really on the forefront of this a number of years ago. It was interesting. These small towns, it was interesting to me.
That certainly was our experience as well. This started in Western Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Now you have Brooklyn and Boardman.
Any? Go ahead, John.
I had a question for the petitioner. Hi. So the issue of the county charter, I assume that's something you would want us to follow up on, or the selectmen to follow up on, in terms of amending the county charter as well?
We hadn't, I didn't know that it was a separate process because the charter changes that would result from this article, again, as we discussed with Senator Sears' office, both the town charter and the Mass General laws could be done at the state level, but we hadn't discussed the county, and I think that's largely because most of Senator Sears' district probably is not its own county.
Right.
So I would imagine so. I don't have the answer in terms of whether that's the only process. If it is, I mean, I can't see why we wouldn't finish up the
Right.
process that
Right.
way. So, yeah.
And then the other thing is the actual bylaws will have to be amended at some point in the
Right.
future. But that's not uncommon. The first step is the charter,
Right.
and then if that passes, we can do the other steps.
That's right. And the charter could be done at the state level.
Great.
So,
Okay, great. Any other questions? So what I had offered up to the petitioners was a discussion here, indicated that our certainly informal process is not to change our recommendation this close to town meeting, but that if there was a sense of the committee, i.e. a majority, wanted to have a representative of the committee speak positively verbally at town meeting, that we would do that. So what is the pleasure of the committee? You're nodding your head over in the far corner, the peanut gallery.
It's okay, thank you.
I recommend we speak positively to it at town meeting. I think this is, for me, it's a no-brainer.
Joe?
It's a second reference to appropriations.
Well, I want to overtax us because we've already had the bar set pretty low today.
Yeah.
All right, yes?
Yep.
Okay, just for formality purposes, can I have a motion and then we'll take a vote on it?
I motion that we speak positively to Article 67 at town meeting.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Would somebody like to volunteer?
I mean, I would if you, or it would be actually more powerful if a male spoke to it. Peter, did you volunteer? Thank you. Did you see his hand go up?
He just started.
Thank you, Peter.
That's leadership.
It is leadership.
and if I could be so bold as to ask, is changing your motion, would adding a comment underneath your motion be tantamount to changing your motion?
We're going to do it verbally.
Okay. Well, I thank you.
So, well, thank you for your persistence.
I think that your words will carry sway, and I know on behalf of Melissa and myself, we appreciate it. And frankly, if you all want to stand up and speak in support, we welcome your voices.
That sounds good.
Give us
Let's
the 2 lines and we'll all
just
be
have
talking
town
about
meeting.
Article
Yeah.
69.
Our other goal is not to, like, there's a lot of important issues at town meeting, and every year we decide them. This is important, but should be an easy, so,
Right.
right?
Great. Thank you very much,
The
Jen.
eternal
Okay.
optimism.
On to our technical amendments, Libby and Brian.
Looks like we have 3. One to Article 10, which I emailed around yesterday, which is adding an item to the motion for repairs to the town pier. This would be a borrowing. And Brian, can you explain the details of it?
Good afternoon, thank you. So, in your packet, you received the technical amendment for the Marine Department, which would authorize the town to borrow $400,000. And the reason that we're asking for borrowing authorization is that this will be submitted to FEMA, as provided there's an emergency or a disaster declaration. We will also be submitting this to our insurance company, subject to certain limits and parameters. We may have insurance coverage on the town pier too, but that process will take a little bit of time, and we need the ability to go out, obviously, and procure the repairs now in time for the summer season. So rather than allocate free cash, which we can ultimately, if we get reimbursement, we could apply free cash to pay the remainder of this short-term borrowing. We're going to take it for 1 year or less because the work will be done very shortly, but the time process to get reimbursed from FEMA and or insurance company may take a little bit longer. So that's why we chose this way. Also, if we have a borrowing authorization, talking to bond counsel and our accountants, when the FEMA money comes in, because we haven't applied free cash, we would be able to actually take the FEMA money and apply it directly to pay the short-term borrowing down. So that's why we've chosen to recommend this route of the borrowing to authorize this.
What's been our experience in getting reimbursements on prior damage to the town piers and storm events?
Well, if you remember back, I think it was 2015, we allocated $1.2 million, and within, I think, 9 months, we did receive the approximately $896,000 back from FEMA. So when there's been a disaster declaration, the reason that we have to go through this way is before we didn't have insurance coverage on the pier. We were able, with our new carrier, to procure some coverage, and there's obviously going to be some discussion between us and FEMA and our insurance companies on what level that amounts to before they would pay for anything.
And so, just to reiterate, you would apply the proceeds of any insurance
and the way it's written,
FEMA
and any
directly
insurance,
to
yes,
the reduction in the
yes, and then
dam.
we would make the recommendation next year, more than likely, to use whatever remaining is. I would make recommendation to town administration to use free cash or other available funding source to close out the ban and pay it off.
Everybody follow the... Can I get a motion to approve the amended Article 10?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Article 13. Anybody?
Pardon me?
Article
I'll
13.
stand right
No,
here.
stand right here. So let's go on to 13.
So 13, we actually are striking the second line or budget transfer from the airport fuel revolving fund into a capital project known as the seasonal hold room in the amount of $630,000, because there was a misunderstanding between Jamie at the airport and myself. This amount is actually authorized to be transferred within Article 12 because it was a capital project that the airport put through Capital Program Committee. And in our discussions, Jamie took from our conversations that we had to transfer it or do it twice, and Article 12 will authorize the transfer as the funding source. So we're recommending striking this out.
So the 630 is coming out of 12.
It would be
staying in 12, coming
yes,
out
and
of
coming
13.
out of 13. It's really, they're both the same thing, and we don't want to authorize a transfer twice for this project.
Okay. So what happens to the revolving fund, the 630,000?
Well, in Article...
Stay in the revolving?
Yeah, this
fund?
amount would not, striking this out, this wouldn't give us an authorization here to transfer it a second time. It would be transferred in Article 12 through that authorization.
And is there a reason why in 12 we're treating it, if we have the 630,000 from the revolving fund,
We do.
we're treating it as a capital item and not an item to expense?
Well, the 630 meets the criteria for the capital item, and it was put through to the Capital Program Committee and recommended as part of Article 12 originally, so that's why we've chosen to keep it there.
It's coming.
Yeah, coming from the same place on both of them, so...
I'm sorry?
It's still coming from the fuel revolver.
Yes, in Article 12.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So, yeah,
As long as that's...
Yes, I'm
the
sorry.
case.
The 12 and
we're
13
not-
are coming from the same spot. That's why we're eliminating the transfer in 13.
Okay.
Sorry for not making that clear.
Okay. Motion to adopt the change?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we have one more, which is CPC, or do you have another technical amendment? I'm done. Okay. John?
Yes, so there are 3 CPA appropriations on the warrant under Article 34, and they are the South Church Preservation Fund, which I believe is the Methodist Church, is that correct? Restoration of historic glass in the windows. And then there's St. Paul's Church, restoration of the bell tower. And then 2 Center Street Restoration Project, Inc., fabricate, paint, and install doors in the sanctuary. So the whole question of the eligibility for CPA funding for religious institutions was completely upended on March 9th of this year, when the Supreme Judicial Court issued a ruling in the case of Kaplan versus the town of Acton that found that a CPA appropriation to restore a stained glass window, which had an image of Jesus in the window, may be very appropriate for this week, but the court found that that actually violated the anti-aid amendment of the Constitution. It's a 77-page decision that goes through great detail on the origins of the anti-aid amendment, and it establishes a three-part test. Because the court did not say under all circumstances, under no circumstances could CPA funds be used to aid for a religious building. The court said there may be appropriate circumstances, but the town would have to undergo a very careful analysis under this three-part test to determine determine whether the project is eligible, meaning not in violation of the anti-aid amendment. Does it promote religion? Is it needed by the church to support its core mission? And it's a very complicated standard. So the chairman of the CPC, Ken Bogran, had contacted me and asked us to prepare an opinion on these three specific CPA appropriations. And so I have requested from Ken, and I did receive late yesterday, the background documentation for these projects, the grant application, the deliberations of the CPC, and I'm in the process of preparing an opinion which will help guide the CPC in that determination. So given the fact that town meeting is Tuesday, and we really need to take a lot of care with this, what I am suggesting, and I had sent this to Ken earlier today and to the town manager, is a technical amendment to Article 34, which would add a proviso, and I was just trying to pull it up on my phone, but it essentially says, thank you, provided that the town shall not enter into any grant agreements or disperse any grant funds for the following three projects, and they're listed, until the Community Preservation Committee makes a determination that said grants are eligible for funding under the standards established in the decision, basically in the Kaplan decision. And I think rather than have these projects have to wait a whole year until we can resolve some of this, I thought it would be best to put that proviso in the motion so that if the CPC conducts its analysis and is able to meet and actually make a determination with our guidance, that the projects could then go forward. But in the meantime, the town would not be subjecting itself to the potential for a 10 taxpayers suit. As I explained to the chair, any 10 taxpayers in a town can sue, and this is what happened in Acton, can sue to enjoin any funds that are about to be expended in violation of state law. And so in the Acton case, it was actually the Center for the Separation of Church and State that funded that litigation, but it took 10 taxpayers in Acton to actually sign the complaint. And 10 taxpayers have statutory standing to bring that kind of a lawsuit. So if we put this proviso in that prohibits the immediate expenditure of those funds, but only upon a determination that it meets the criteria, that will insulate the town from litigation. Although I would hasten to add that no matter what the CPC comes up with, reasonable minds can disagree, and there would certainly be at least the potential in the future for an action to try to enjoin the expenditure of those funds. But we wanted to put this. I am recommending we put this in the motion to give us some breathing room without actually killing these appropriations so close to town meeting.
A quick question. I'm assuming that the Nantucket Interfaith Council and its housing and rental assistance program doesn't.
Well, those funds are going directly for affordable housing to benefit individuals. I will say that if you are a real glutton for punishment and over maybe several bottles of wine, you want to sit down and read the 77 pages of that decision, it raises some very serious questions that even go beyond religious institutions. But at this point, I think we have to look at the particular facts of the Acton case and apply those facts and the test to any proposals for the grants to religious institutions. I think you can make an argument, David, that even though it's the Interfaith Council, that money is going for the benefit for promoting affordable
It's
housing
in a
to
non-denominational
Yes. Yeah.
request.
In this case, do they have the potential to be appealed?
Well, it was a decision of the Supreme Judicial Court, which is of course, the highest court in Massachusetts, but it actually raises questions under the U.S. Constitution whether this is an impermissible discrimination against religious institutions. Now, that would require the town of Acton or some other party with standing. I believe the Attorney General did intervene in the case on behalf of the town, but it would require one of the litigants in that case to essentially file for a petition for writ of certiorari with the Supreme Court. That's not an automatic appeal. The court would have to accept it, and the review would be limited to the federal constitutional question.
Great.
What about retroactively? Do we have liability retroactively?
So we've talked about that, and our advice to our clients is if you have previously appropriated CPA funds for a religious institution, and those funds have been dispersed pursuant to a grant agreement, that there's no real mechanism to get that, to recapture that money. So we don't think it would be applied retroactively. But stay tuned.
Great. Thank you very much, John.
Yeah.
Helpful. So that's the workaround that's proposed. A motion to accept what John has proposed and will show up as a technical amendment. We got a motion. We got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any other business to come before the Finance Committee today? In which case, we'll adjourn at 2:02 and turn the floor over to